My daughter laughed when she said I should move to a nursing home. She and her fiancé wanted my $295,000 house, as if my lifetime of work meant nothing. I saw Eleanor's yellow kitchen, the walls we painted together, turned into their target. My chest tightened, but my resolve grew stronger. They pushed me too far. They will regret their words and their actions. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from in the comments. I sat alone in the living room that evening. The March wind rattling the windows Eleanor had insisted on replacing just a year before her diagnosis. The house felt quieter than usual, but not with the comforting kind of quiet you earn after decades of honest work. No, this was the hollow quiet of betrayal. Every creak of the floorboards, every whistle of the wind reminded me of the words my daughter had thrown at me earlier that week. Caroline had looked me in the eye and told me that she and Travis needed this house, my house. The place where her mother and I had built a life, brick by brick, dollar by dollar. She said I could move to one of those senior places with bingo nights and scheduled meals like I was a worn-out tool ready to be put on the shelf. The sting of it sat heavy in my chest, but as I looked around the room, my mind began to drift backward, unspooling the years that had led us here. I remembered the long weeks at Morrison's garage, 60 hours, sometimes 70, hands cracked from grease and cold steel. That was how I kept the lights on, how I scraped together enough to give Caroline opportunities I never had. $60,000 in tuition, every cent of it saved from oil changes and transmission rebuilds just so she could graduate from college without the crushing debt most kids faced. I remembered signing those checks, feeling a strange mix of pride and fear, wondering if I'd ever have enough left for retirement. But I told myself it was worth it. For her, it was always worth it. Then there was the Mustang. My pride and joy, a cherry red '68 I'd restored over countless weekends. Eleanor used to laugh, saying it was my second love, though she never really minded. When Caroline announced her first wedding, I knew the dress she wanted was far beyond what my savings could handle. $7,500, silk imported from Italy, lace so fine that Eleanor's fingers trembled when she touched it. I sold the Mustang without a second thought, handed the money over, and told myself I'd get another car one day. But deep down, I knew I'd never replace it. That car was a piece of me. And yet, watching Caroline walk down the aisle, I thought maybe the sacrifice was worth it. Of course, the marriage didn't last. Less than 3 years later, she came back, tears streaming, debts piling up. $15,000 she couldn't cover, and once again I opened my checkbook. I remember Eleanor shaking her head, warning me not to enable her, but what could I do? She was my daughter. I thought love meant always being there, no matter the cost. And now here we were, all those sacrifices, all that sweat and giving, paid back with a cold demand for the very roof over my head. I looked around the room as the sun began to dip, filling the space with that soft golden light Eleanor had loved. The hardwood floors gleamed faintly, boards I had laid myself one winter when money was tight and contractors were out of the question. I remembered Eleanor on her knees beside me, paint-splattered hands smoothing varnish, her laugh echoing through the house. Those floors weren't just wood, they were a record of our life together. On the mantel above the fireplace sat our wedding photo, Eleanor's veil catching the afternoon light. Next to it, a crystal cabinet filled with glasses we'd received as gifts over the years, still polished, still waiting for family gatherings that no longer came. This wasn't just a house worth $295,000. It was a life. It was our history. And Caroline had reduced it to an asset, something to be put to better use. The words still burned. At first, I felt only shock, the kind that leaves your body frozen, unable to respond. It was as if Caroline's voice had come from someone else entirely, not the little girl whose scraped knees I'd bandaged or whose homework I'd stayed up late to check. But as the hours passed, that shock twisted into something else. Anger, cold, sharp anger that cut deeper than any wound I'd felt before. I found myself whispering to the photo of Eleanor, like I had so many times since she passed. "You always told me dignity isn't negotiable. You said it the day the insurance man tried to cheat us after the storm. You stood your ground, Eleanor. And now look at me. Our own daughter thinks I'm weak. She thinks I'll just hand it all over." My throat tightened, but I kept going. They think I've lost my fire, but they're wrong. You'll see. They'll see. The kitchen called to me, with its pale yellow walls, the ones Eleanor painted 20 years ago when she decided the place needed warmth. She spent days with a brush in hand, humming as she worked, refusing my help because she wanted it done her way. Even now, the sunlight caught the brush strokes if you looked closely enough. That paint was her signature on our home, as permanent as any legal deed. I imagined Caroline stripping it away, painting it some cold gray to fit her modern vision. The thought made my hands shake. I glanced at the refrigerator, magnets still holding photos of Caroline's graduation, Eleanor's last Christmas, and little notes she used to leave for me. Don't forget milk. Dinner at 6. Simple things, but they carried more weight than any of Caroline's demands. These were reminders of love, of partnership, of a life built on sacrifice and care. And now my daughter, my own blood, wanted to toss it aside like old furniture. The more I thought about it, the more I realized the betrayal wasn't just about the house. It was about everything the house represented: love, labor, memory, dignity. Caroline wasn't just asking me to move, she was erasing me, erasing Eleanor, turning decades of work into a down payment for her new life with Travis. I clenched my fists and walked toward the study. That room had always been my refuge, the place where I kept order in our lives. The desk, solid oak, scarred with years of bills, letters, and small repairs. I pulled open the top drawer and felt the familiar weight of the file folders. Deed, insurance, mortgage papers long since paid. I had kept everything, meticulously labeled, because Eleanor had insisted on it. "Never let anyone tell you what you own," she'd said. "Keep the proof." And there it was. Proof. Caroline might think she held all the cards, but the papers in my hands told another story. This house was mine, bought with decades of labor, maintained with love, no signatures but mine and Eleanor's, no right for anyone else to claim. For the first time since Caroline's demand, I felt a strange calm, not relief, not acceptance, something sharper, a sense of power. If she wanted a fight, she'd get one, but it would be on my terms. I leaned back in the chair, letting the fading light from the window fall across the documents. My reflection stared back at me from the glass frame of our wedding photo, tired but not beaten. I whispered again, softer this time, as if Eleanor were leaning close. "They think I'm finished, but I'm not. You always said I was stubborn. Now I'll prove it." The house groaned in the evening chill, the same familiar sound it had made every winter. But instead of hearing it as a warning of age, I heard it now as solidarity. This home had stood with me through storms, through lean years, through Eleanor's illness. It would stand with me now. Downstairs, I imagined Caroline and Travis already making plans, seeing dollar signs where I saw memories. They thought the future was theirs to script. But as I slid the deed back into the drawer, my decision was made. The next chapter would not be theirs to write. I rose from the chair, my knees aching but my back straighter than it had been in years. My eyes landed on the photograph of Eleanor again, her smile as steady as ever. For a moment, I let myself believe she was here, urging me on. This wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of theirs, one they wouldn't expect, one they wouldn't control. And as I turned off the study light, my hand brushed the drawer where the papers rested. I knew what I had to do. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 1 below to let me know you're here with me. I woke up before dawn, the house still and blue, the kind of quiet that used to mean peace when Eleanor was here. It didn't mean peace now. It meant I had work to do. My hands found the edge of the nightstand, the cool lamp chain, the familiar rhythm of a morning I'd lived for 40 years. Except this morning, I wasn't a man going through the motions. I was a man moving from hurt to action. I sat up slowly, felt the ache in my lower back, and let the breath fill my chest. They thought I would fold. They thought I would give up what Eleanor and I had built. Not today. I made coffee the way Eleanor liked it, 2 scoops rounded, a pinch of salt to tame the bitterness. Old habit, old comfort. While it dripped, I laid the deed on the kitchen table and smoothed the corners with my palm. I had pulled it from the study drawer the night before and left it where I could see it first thing. My name, Eleanor's name, paid in full. No liens, no one else on it, not Caroline, not Travis, just us. The paper felt like a spine returning to my body. I dialed my lawyer as the first light pushed through the blinds. Her name is Janet Whitmore. We've known each other since the storm that took out a third of our roof. She handled the insurance fight like a bulldog with a ribbon on her collar. Her office line has an early voicemail, but she picks up before most coffee shops open. She answered on the second ring, voice steady, like she had been waiting for trouble to walk in the door. "Janet," I said, and even to my own ear I sounded different. Not wounded, focused. I told her what Caroline said. I told her about Travis, his boots on Eleanor's coffee table, the way he surveyed my living room as if he owned it. I told her about the suggestion that I move to a senior place, the way Caroline said it, like she was doing me a favor. I read Janet the deed line by line, letting each word land. She didn't interrupt. When I finished, all I heard was the faint scratch of her pen. "Franklin," she said at last, "you have a clean title. You are the sole living owner. No joint tenancy with your daughter. No recorded encumbrances. That house is yours to keep, to sell, or to give away. Period." I let that settle. "What if they push?" I asked. "What if they try to move in and make decisions while I'm still here?" Janet's voice shifted into the tone I remembered from the insurance battle years ago. Calm, factual, firm. "You can revoke permission to be in your home at any time. If they refuse to leave, you call the police for trespass. If you fear financial pressure, we can document it. Elder financial exploitation is real, and judges take it seriously, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. The simplest route is often the quietest. If you want to sell, you sell. You don't need their consent. You don't need to tell them in advance." I stared at the sunlight catching on Eleanor's yellow paint. Quiet, simple, clean. I liked those words. "Janet," I said, "I need you to confirm in writing that my title is clear and that I have full authority to sell. I want that letter today." "You'll have it by noon," she said. "Do you want me to recommend a real estate agent?" "I'll make a few calls," I told her, "but send me the letter, email and hard copy." I gave her my P.O. box, the one Eleanor set up for us when we had a mail thief on the street one winter. Eleanor always planned. I could almost hear her saying it now. After I hung up, I dialed the bank. I asked them to set alerts on my accounts. I asked for a temporary freeze on withdrawals above $1,000 unless I was present in person with ID. I asked them to flag any attempts to access safe deposit contents by anyone not named on the box. The manager, a woman who'd known Eleanor from church, listened without judgment. She understood. She promised to add notes to my profile and to require callback verification on any unusual transactions. I thanked her. I didn't want a fight at the bank. I wanted quiet guardrails, the kind you barely notice until they stop a fall. I washed my coffee mug and wiped the counter until it shone. The house felt different already, like a horse shifting its weight before a run. I gathered a small stack of documents from the study, maintenance records, the water heater receipt, and the electrical upgrade invoice Eleanor insisted on when summers got hotter. I slipped them into a plain manila folder and placed it flat in the drawer with the deed. Then I wrote in block letters on a post-it and stuck it to the inside wood. "Don't forget who we are." I could hear Eleanor's laugh. "You and your notes, Frank," she used to say, kissing the top of my head as she walked past. At 9, I called Lakeside Realty and asked for a discreet evaluation. I used the word discreet on purpose. The receptionist lowered her voice like we were trading secrets. She said a broker could come by tomorrow morning. I told her the morning was best. Could we do 9 on the dot? She said yes. I gave her my cell and asked for a text confirmation. I didn't want emails popping up on the family computer where Caroline might see them if she started snooping. She'd started snooping lately. She'd started opening drawers that weren't hers. At 10 past 10, I heard the front door open and close, and then the heavy thud of Travis's boots across my hardwood. He didn't knock anymore. He didn't ask if it was a good time. He simply walked in and announced himself to the house. His mouth kept calling, "Ours." I stayed in the kitchen, hands calm at my sides, heartbeat steady the way it gets when you're lifting an engine block. No sudden jerks, just pure control. "Morning, Franklin," he said, reaching for the coffee pot before I could offer. He poured a mug and didn't ask if anyone wanted the last cup. "Caroline's at work, so it's just us fellas." Fellas. He said it like we were teammates. He flopped into Eleanor's place at the table and spread the paper out like a man with hours to waste and someone else's bills to pay. "We should talk numbers," he said without looking up. "Miami's got good deals this month if we book now. Flights, hotel, the whole thing. $2,500 should cover it. You know, a little getaway before the wedding." The words landed softly, as if he were asking me to pass the salt. I felt the air go thin. I could hear a truck down the block, the neighbor's dog, the clock tick, all of it clearer than usual. I wiped a non-existent crumb from the table and met his eyes. "No," I said. One word. Clean. Flat. It felt good. He blinked. It took him a second to adjust his face. Then he gave a little laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "Come on, Franklin, it's not a big ask. We'll pay you back." I watched his hands. They were the hands of a man who took things. "I said no," I repeated, and I let the silence stand between us a full 5 seconds so he could feel its size. "Caroline won't like that," he said. "Caroline already doesn't like a lot of things," I said. "She'll survive." He drummed his fingers, then leaned back, chair creaking. "You're being difficult for no reason." Inside, I heard my own voice rise and settle like a tide. "Don't take the bait. Keep your powder dry." I set my mug in the sink. "Travis," I said, "I'm not funding a vacation. That's the end of it." He exhaled, blew air through his lips like a horse, then shrugged and let the subject go as if it were his idea. "Fine," he said, and flipped the paper to the home section. "So, renovations. I've been doing some math. If we knock out the wall between the kitchen and the living room, open the space, we could add at least 50 grand in value, but we'd have to put in about 20 to do it right. Permits, electrician, maybe new floors." I kept my back to him and washed my mug again. "We're not knocking down a wall," I said. "Sure we are," he said, easy as Sunday. "It's a good investment. People pay for an open concept. Your house is stuck in the 80s. No offense." I dried my hands slowly. "This is my house," I said, and I let the words sit there, simple as a nail, hard as one too. He reached the end table and propped his boots up on Eleanor's coffee table. Scuffed soles on varnish she had rubbed with lemon oil every spring. The movement was small, but it felt like a fist in my chest. "It's everyone's house if we're a family," he said. "We pool resources. We make sensible decisions." "Sensible," I said softly. He nodded, thinking he'd scored a point. "Exactly." That afternoon, Caroline came by on her lunch break. She swung the door wide and called my name like she was the landlord conducting an inspection. She kissed the air near my cheek and dropped her keys on the counter with that sharp clatter I had learned to dread. She opened my refrigerator and helped herself to the leftovers Eleanor used to label with masking tape. Caroline didn't look like a villain. That might be the hardest part. She looked like my kid, her mother's eyes, my stubborn chin, a smile she could turn on like a porch light when it served her. She sank into the chair beside Travis, took his hand, and smiled at me like we were all gathered for a family planning meeting. "Dad," she said, "we've been talking. We think it's best if you move downstairs. We'll make the basement nice for you. A little apartment, your own entrance, privacy. We'll take the master and the guest room. It's just more practical." Basement, apartment, privacy. Gentle words, like a cushion being pressed over a face. I looked at her, and my mouth stayed closed because if it opened, too much would come out. I pictured Eleanor down there among the Christmas boxes, the thread drawers, the little handwritten labels she used for everything, sewing notions, holiday lights, wedding china. I pictured Travis hauling those boxes to the curb because they were clutter. I pictured Caroline painting over Eleanor's kitchen with glossy gray paint because it looked good on Instagram. "Dad, say something," Caroline said, impatience cracking through her careful tone. I turned my coffee mug in my hands. I saw the scrape near the rim where Eleanor banged it on the sink the day we learned her diagnosis. A chip like a small white tooth. I still used it because she had used it. I set it down and folded my hands. "I heard you," I said. "You want upstairs. You want me downstairs." "It's not about wants," she said. "It's about what makes sense. You're alone up here. We could help with bills. Travis could fix things. He's handy." Travis nodded, generous with his own resume. "The porch step, the squeaky door, the electrical. I can handle all of it." "The electrical was updated when your mother wanted air conditioning in the bedroom," I said, and it felt good to say your mother out loud in this room. "It's fine," Caroline pushed on. "We could add value. It's a smart move. You taught me to be practical." I let my gaze travel to the crystal cabinet. Eleanor's wedding glasses caught the light, those thin stems she loved to polish while we talked about nothing. Caroline followed my eyes and smiled in a way I didn't recognize. "Actually," she said, voice light, "we could sell that cabinet and the glasses. Estate sale folks could get us a few thousand easily. That money could go straight into the renovations." Something inside my chest went very still. Not broken. Not yet. Still like timber right before it snaps. I put my palm on the edge of the table and felt the old wood, the scratches where Caroline did homework, the small burn mark from a too-hot pot at Thanksgiving. I pressed my fingers flat until my knuckles whitened. I could feel my pulse in them. "Don't worry," Travis said, reading only the surface of my face. "We'll keep a couple of glasses for sentimental reasons. The rest is just stuff. Just stuff." I heard my breath catch. I breathed out through my nose and tasted metal. I thought of Eleanor turning those glasses in her hands, how she'd line them up in the sunlight to check for dust, how she'd laugh at herself for fussing. I thought of our anniversary toast, crystal pinging like small bells. I thought of the day we chose that cabinet on a layaway plan, $50 a week for months, until the store manager carried it to our truck like it was ours at last. I thought of how Eleanor would stand, hands on her hips, when something mattered. I thought of that, and then I did something I don't think Caroline expected. I smiled a little, not a happy smile, a private one, a smile that said, "I hear you, and I will answer you on my terms." "Let's not rush," I said quietly. "We can't wait forever," Caroline said. "Travis's lease is up soon." "Soon," I repeated, and let the word do its work in the air. That night, after they left in a tide of perfume and cologne and certainty, I walked through the house like I was saying grace, room to room, touching wood, touching paint. I stood in the doorway of the basement steps and looked down into the dim where they had planned to tuck me away. The single pull chain with the tin shade, the smell of dust and soap, the workbench where Eleanor used to set her sewing machine when she needed space for big projects. The pegboard where my wrenches hung, each silhouette marked in black Sharpie so no tool ever lost its place. I pictured a bed shoved against the cinder block, a hot plate on the shelf, a life shrunk down to one room, and a set of stairs. The air tightened in my throat. In the study, I turned on the desk lamp and pulled the drawer. The files were already neat. My whole life has been about neat. You keep your tools clean, you stack your receipts, you label your jars. It isn't about being fussy, it's about respect. Respect for your labor, respect for what you build. I sorted the documents into 3 piles, title and deed, maintenance and improvements, and household bills and taxes. I added a 4th pile for memorial, Eleanor's ring in its little box, the one I couldn't bear to bury with her. I placed the ring on top of the deed and rested my hand on both. The metal warmed under my skin. I called Janet again in the morning. She had already emailed the letter confirming my authority. She told me the hard copy would arrive tomorrow at the P.O. box. She also suggested a simple thing that settled me more than I expected. "Franklin," she said, "if you choose to sell, you may want to remove personal keepsakes now. Quietly. A small storage unit. No fuss. No questions. That way, whatever happens here in the next week, your memories are safe." I thanked her. After we hung up, I drove to the storage place on Franklin Street and rented a 5x10. The manager, a woman in her 50s with sensible shoes, handed me a clipboard and a lock. I signed the monthly plan and tucked the key into my wallet behind the photo of Eleanor in the sundress she wore to our 40th anniversary picnic. I moved slowly, box by box. I took only what mattered: the wedding album, Eleanor's recipe binder with butter stains on page 43, the quilt she made for our 20th year with small squares from old shirts, the toolbox my father gave me that still smelled faintly of machine oil. I labeled each carton in block letters, not for sale, Do not discard. Property of F. Harris. When I came back home near noon, Caroline was sitting on the front steps with a takeout salad, tapping on her phone with the flat impatience that only the very young or the very careless can afford. She looked up, peered into the truck bed, and narrowed her eyes. "What's all that?" she asked. "Old paperwork," I said. "A few things for safekeeping." She chewed, swallowed, and dabbed her lips like a woman finishing a small victory. "Good. Decluttering will help when we show the place to contractors. They need to see the bones." I nodded and unlocked the front door. "The bones," I repeated, because sometimes the best answer is to let a foolish phrase echo long enough to hear itself. In the kitchen, she washed her plastic fork and dried it with my dish towel, as if she were showing me how helpful she could be. She started in again about the basement, the private entrance, the independence, the way I'd have my own quiet. She made it sound like a gift, a young queen granting a small province to an old duke who had outlived his usefulness. I listened. I sipped water. My face stayed as neutral as a lake with no wind. Inside, something bright and hard was setting, like concrete poured and leveled with a trowel. By late afternoon, Travis joined us. He had quotes. He had numbers. He had a way of making $20,000 sound like a grocery list. He wanted new counters in a stone I can't pronounce. He wanted open shelving that would hold nothing heavier than a teacup. He wanted to tear out the pantry Eleanor designed so she could keep food on hand for anyone who stopped by, and we always had someone stopping by back then. He called the pantry dead space. I pressed my lips together to keep from saying what I thought of that. They were so sure. That was the thing. They were so sure. Every sentence was a plan. Every look was a decree. Every dollar they mentioned was already spent in their heads. When I said I wasn't paying for Miami, they laughed it off like a joke they'd been told before. When I said the wall stays, they smiled like parents humoring a child. When I said I liked the pantry, they told me I'd like the new design better. It was all decided. It was settled. They were moving me under the stairs and calling it mercy. By evening, the house felt crowded with their certainty. I stepped outside to breathe. The yard Eleanor shaped with her hands spread before me, the bird bath she insisted on, the roses she planted after the neighbor's boy cut a path across our lawn one summer. She planted thorny bushes along that line and smiled to herself when the boy chose the sidewalk after that. Eleanor never raised her voice. She raised roses. She set boundaries you couldn't argue with. I stood there in the cool air and felt her beside me, not as a ghost, just as a weight in my chest that wasn't pain. "They think I'm beaten," I whispered. "They think this is over. But it isn't. The game has just begun." After dinner, Travis stretched out on the couch and turned on my TV like it owed him something. Caroline wandered to the crystal cabinet and opened the glass door. She tapped one stem with her nail so it rang like a sad note. "We can start here," she said over her shoulder, as if the house should thank her for the plan. "Estate sale on Saturday. List everything online. Dad, you won't need the dining set in the basement apartment. We could sell that too." I kept my face soft. "That's something you learn over the years in a garage. Keep your hands slow, your voice even, your eyes kind. Let the other person show you who they are. They always do." "Right on schedule," Travis piped up. "A guy I know can haul the big stuff for a cut. It'd be quick cash." "Cash," Caroline repeated, as if it were a blessing. She shut the cabinet and left her fingerprints on the glass. I walked to the sink and ran the water until it was hot, hotter than it needed to be. I washed my plate, dried it, and slid it into the cupboard. Then I went to the study. I didn't slam the door. I didn't need to. The click of it was enough. Under the lamp, I laid out my plan like a mechanic laying out tools on a towel. Call the lawyer. Done. Get the letter. Done. Set bank alerts. Done. Rent storage. Done. Arrange a discreet evaluation. 9 a.m. tomorrow. Quiet. Clean. No drama. I wrote the steps in a neat column and checked them off with a small square beside each line. I printed my name exactly the way it appears on the deed and practiced the motion of my signature once, twice, 3 times on scrap paper, not because I had forgotten, but because it felt good to remind my hand that it still belonged to me. The phone buzzed. A text from Lakeside Realty confirmed the morning appointment. A second message from Janet landed a minute later. "Franklin, your letter is in your email. I will courier the hard copy to your P.O. box by tomorrow at noon. You are in control. Call if you need anything else." I read the line twice. "You are in control." I said it out loud. "I am." I opened the drawer and took out the ring. I set it on the deed and watched the lamplight spark on the gold. For a moment I saw Eleanor's fingers wearing it, the way she turned it when she was thinking. I rested 2 fingers on the metal and felt its small warmth. "We're all right," I said to the empty room that didn't feel empty at all. "I'm all right. I won't let them turn your kitchen cold. I won't let them put me underground like a box you store for winter." From the living room, laughter floated back, loud, thoughtless, the kind of laughter that fills a place it hasn't earned. I wrote one more note for myself and tucked it under the deed. "Don't bargain with your dignity." Eleanor's words, not mine, but I had borrowed them so many times they lived in my mouth like my own. As the house settled for the night, as the heater clicked and the wind shifted and the neighborhood dogs barked at nothing, I did the last small thing that marks the line between intention and action. I reached for the key to the P.O. box and slid it onto my everyday key ring, right next to the house key, right next to the small metal tag that says Harris in stamped letters. The ring felt heavier, truer. A man's pocket weight, the kind you notice when you change clothes and miss it for a second. When I finally turned off the lamp, I didn't feel the dull ache I had carried all week. I felt a clean burn, the kind of heat that throws light. I stood in the doorway, a long breath, and looked back at the desk. The neat stacks, the ring, the deed, the pen. Every piece in its place. Every piece is ready. They think they've already won, I thought. They think this house is a prize they'll collect when the old man finally gives up. But they don't know what's coming. They don't know I've built something stronger than walls. I've built a line, and tomorrow I'll start moving it forward. I closed the door softly so the latch wouldn't carry down the hall. In the dark kitchen, I ran my fingertips along the familiar counter Eleanor chose, the cool seam where 2 pieces met, the tiny chip only I know is there. "It's time," I whispered, so quiet even I barely heard it. "It's time to take back control." If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment too, below, to let me know you're here with me. I woke to the gray of a cold morning, the kind that makes the house breathe and sigh. The appointment was at 9. I had Janet's letter in my email and a printed copy folded in my jacket pocket. I made coffee, strong and simple, and set the deed, the maintenance folder, and the water heater receipt on the kitchen table. I ran my finger over Eleanor's yellow paint and told myself, "Steady now. Today is for action, not for anger." At 8:45, a silver sedan rolled into the driveway. The broker stepped out with a tablet and a calm smile. Her name was Elaine. She moved through the front room like someone who respects old wood. She noticed the sunlight on the floor I lay on. She noticed the clean lines in the trim I sanded by hand. She did not comment on the photos. She let them speak for themselves. She walked through the house with me. She took pictures with a wide lens and made notes. When she reached the kitchen, she touched the countertop and nodded. We climbed the stairs quietly. The sewing room was still. Eleanor's small notes on the drawers faced us like tiny flags. Elaine measured the light with her eyes and the square footage with a quiet tape. She did not open closets without asking. I liked that. Back downstairs, she set her tablet on the table and gave me a number. "If you want speed without panic, I would list at 295, she said. "The house is in excellent condition. You will have interest right away. Speed without panic." I let the phrase sit in my chest. "Do it," I said. "Today." We signed the listing agreement on the kitchen table. I initialed pages. I signed my full name with care. Elaine scheduled the photographer for noon and the listing to go live at 3. She said a young couple had been searching in this school district for months. She asked if I preferred private showings. I said yes, one at a time, no open house. She nodded and wrote it down. At 11:30, the photographer arrived. He framed the rooms with care. He took one picture of the crystal cabinet because the glass caught the light like water. He smiled when he saw it. I did not tell him how those glasses had sung on our anniversaries. I did not tell him what my daughter planned to do with them. By mid-afternoon, the listing went live. Elaine texted a link with a short note. "You'll have a showing at 4. 30 minutes later, she sent a second text. "A serious couple at 5:15. I looked at the clock. Caroline's shift ended at 6. Travis drifted when he pleased. The timing was a gift I had not asked for and would not waste. At 3:50, I stepped outside and watched a compact SUV pull to the curb. Daniel and Emily Carter climbed out, nervous but hopeful, the way people look when they have counted their pennies with love. Elaine met them at the walkway and waved to me as if I were a neighbor, not the owner. I heard the soft exclamation when they reached the kitchen. I knew that sound. It is the sound people make when a place chooses them. 20 minutes later, Elaine walked them out, and I saw relief on their faces. At 6 o'clock, my phone rang. Elaine did not waste words. "The Carters want to make a full-price offer," she said, $295. "They are ready to waive minor inspections. They have verified funds with their credit union. They can close Saturday morning if the title company has an opening. Do you accept?" I looked at the deed on the table. I looked at Eleanor's ring in its small box. "I accept," I said. "Schedule it." Elaine sent the offer by email and drove it over with printed copies. We signed at the kitchen table again. Janet called as we finished. "I have reviewed the purchase agreement," she said. "Terms are clean. The title is clear. The closing can be set for 10 a.m. Saturday. I will be there. You will bring your ID. The buyers will bring their cashier's check. Funds will post the same day. We will wire to your account." When I hung up, I stood at the sink where Eleanor used to peel apples for pies, and I let the water run over my hands until the cool turned warm. The house hummed like a quiet engine. It knew what was coming. So did I. That night the wind shifted, and with it came a conversation I was not meant to hear. I had gone to the hall to turn off the lamp, and I heard voices carry from the living room in that easy, careless way people use when they think the walls are loyal. Caroline sat with her shoes off and her feet tucked under her, the way she used to sit as a teenager when she wanted something. Travis sprawled across my couch like he had paid for every cushion. "Just a little longer," he murmured. "He's tired. He'll give in. Once he's downstairs, it's just a matter of paperwork. We'll move fast. We'll get the power bill in our name. We'll start the permits. Once he's in assisted living, nobody will question it." Carolyn's voice was softer, but the words were sharp. "You really think so?" "Of course," he said. "People do it all the time. It's practical. He can't handle the stairs forever. You know that." I stood in the shadow of the hallway, one hand on the doorframe. The house did not move. The air did not move. I heard my heart, steady and slow. I did not step into the room. I did not speak. A different kind of heat filled my chest, not rage, not grief. Resolve, clean and weighty, like a tool you know exactly how to use. I turned, went to the study, and wrote a line in my notebook. They plan to remove me. Proceed. Friday moved like a set of gears. Everything clicked into place. Elaine scheduled the final walkthrough for the Carters at 3. Janet confirmed closing for 10. The title company sent me a list of items to bring and a polite note about the room where we would sign. Second floor, end of hall, paneling dark as tea, a window that looks toward the lake. Please arrive 10 minutes early. Please bring 2 forms of identification. I smiled when I read it. Caroline and Travis came by in the afternoon. They talked about paint colors. They talked about the Miami trip as if I had not already said no. When I reminded them, Caroline flinched, then smoothed her face. Travis shrugged like a man who believes time is on his side. "We'll figure it out," he said. "We always do." He crossed his ankles on Eleanor's table. It looked like the second hand of a cheap clock. Tick, tick, tick. At 3, the doorbell rang. Elaine stood with the Carters behind her, faces bright but respectful, hands folded around a folder of questions written in careful ink. Caroline opened the door before I could reach it. She smiled at Daniel like a hostess. "Can I help you?" she asked in a voice that did not belong to her. Elaine's smile did not change. "Hello," she said. "We are here for a scheduled appointment." She turned her head toward me slightly, and I stepped forward from the hallway. "Welcome," I told the Carters. "Please come in." Caroline's face tightened at the corners as they passed. She looked at me as if I had broken a promise she had written in her head. Travis stood, chest out, chin up. He took one step forward like a guard, then stopped when Daniel held out his hand with an easy, steady kindness. "Sir," Daniel said to me, "thank you for letting us come through one more time. We want to make sure we understand the water shutoff, the attic access, and the breaker box labels. We like to be prepared." "Of course," I said. I led them to the basement door and switched the light on. The yellow cone fell across the steps and touched the pegboard where my tools hung in their outlines. I heard Caroline breathe in as if she might speak. She did not. We walked through the house one last time, careful, methodical. Emily asked about the roses in the yard. I told her Eleanor's secret for strong blooms. I said the name out loud and let it settle in the room like a blessing. Back in the kitchen, Daniel set his folder down and looked me straight in the eye. "We are grateful," he said. "This house feels like a place we can build a life." I nodded. "It has been that," I said, and my voice did not break. "And it will be again." After they left, Caroline turned to me with a thin smile. "Friends of yours?" she asked. "Buyers," I said. She blinked, as if the word were in a language she did not speak. "Buyers of what?" "The house," I said. "We close at 10 tomorrow." For a heartbeat, she did not move. Then she laughed, a high, brittle sound, and looked at Travis to cue his grin. Travis did not grin. His eyes searched my face for the joke. When the joke did not appear, he took a step closer. "You can't sell," he said. "Not without—" "Without what?" I asked. He opened his hands, palms up, as if catching rain. "Without talking to us." "I am talking to you now," I said. "The papers are signed. The title is clear. The money will be wired to my account on Saturday. I will be out of the house before you return from your weekend drive. You can pick up your belongings from a storage unit on Franklin Street. Your boxes are labeled. I treated your things with care." Caroline's mouth moved, but the words were slow to come. "You did this to punish me," she said. "To punish us." I shook my head once. "I did this to protect what your mother and I built. I did this to protect my dignity." Travis tried again, voice louder, shoulders thrown back like a man on a stage. "We had plans." "I know," I said. "I heard them." Silence sat between us like a heavy chair. Caroline found her breath and reached for anger. "You can't do this. People don't do this to family." "People do this for family," I said. "They set boundaries. They stop harm. They act when others will not." She pointed at the crystal cabinet. "What about the things? What about the wedding glasses?" "They are safe," I said. "They are not for sale." Her face shifted, sharp with something that looked like fear, then smoothed again into a mask I recognized from her teenage years when she wanted me to change my mind. "Dad," she said, reaching for the small word that used to open every door, "let's talk about this." "We just did," I said. They left in a storm of footsteps and whispered strategy. I did not follow. I packed my small suitcase, the one with the quiet wheels. I placed Eleanor's ring in my shirt pocket where it could rest against my heart. I put the letter for the Carters into a plain envelope and sealed it. On the front, I wrote their names, neat as ledger ink. Inside, the note was brief. "You will be good to this house, and it will be good to you. Please give Caroline the enclosed key and this message when she arrives." I chose each word the way a mechanic chooses a wrench that fits. Saturday morning smelled like rain and clean paper. I put on the jacket Eleanor liked best, the one she said made my shoulders look strong. I met the Carters and Janet in the title company's office, second floor, end of hall, the paneling dark as tea, just like the email said. The room had a long table, polished by 1,000 hands. The notary was kind. The file was thick. Janet slid pages to me with a steady rhythm. "Sign here. Initially there. Read this clause. Confirm this number. $295,000. A steady figure. A final figure." Janet squeezed my shoulder. "It's done," she said. "You did well." Daniel shook my hand with both of his. Emily's eyes shone. "We will take care of it," she said. "We promise." "I know," I told them. "That is why I chose you." I handed Daniel the envelope with the notes and the keys on a ring that felt lighter than it had yesterday. I walked out into the hallway feeling taller. The window at the end looked toward the lake. I stood for a moment and let myself breathe. When I reached home for the last time, I walked through each room and said a quiet thank you. Thank you to the floorboards that held us through winter. Thank you to the sink that rinsed apples and coffee cups and paint brushes. Thank you to the chair where Eleanor sat and mended 1,000 small things. I left the folder of manuals on the kitchen counter with a small label that said, "For the Carters." I wiped the counter one last time. I locked the back door and left the key on the hook. I closed the front door and let the latch speak for me. Carolyn and Travis pulled up as I reached the sidewalk. Their faces were a study in weather, shock, heat, storm. Carolyn stepped out fast, words already forming, but Daniel met her at the gate with the envelope in his hand. He spoke gently, the way a decent man speaks to a person who is about to hear what they do not want to hear. I did not stay to watch. I had already lived that scene in my head and did not need to play it in my body. At the airport, I sat by the window and watched a line of planes lift into the gray. I took Eleanor's ring from my pocket and turned it in my fingers until it warmed. I thought of the roses. I thought of the glass cabinet. I thought of my daughter as a little girl, bringing me dandelions with roots and all, proud of the bouquet. I thought of the woman she had become, and I did not hate her. I let the hatred drain from me like old oil. Boundaries are protection. Boundaries are love. On the plane, the overhead vents hissed a soft white noise that felt like a lullaby. I closed my eyes and saw the lake again, then the ocean beyond it, blue and wide. I whispered, "We did it, Eleanor." I touched the ring to my chest. I felt the thump of my own heart answer. Somewhere high above the clouds, the phone in my pocket buzzed against the fabric of my jacket. I did not take it out. I knew what it would be. Missed calls, texts. Words were trying to pull me back into a room I had already left. When we landed, I stepped into humid air and felt it move across my face like a welcome. I followed the signs, found my bag, and walked into light that felt new and honest. I was not running. I was arriving. Before I turned my phone back on, I spoke the final sentence I needed to say to the man I had been all week. They thought I was weak, I told myself, but now they see the cost. I clicked the phone awake. The screen is filled with messages. I scrolled past them to Janet's note. Funds wired, confirmed. Call me Monday if you need anything else. I typed back 2 words. Thank you. As the taxi rolled along the road toward the small hotel where I would stay for a few nights, I watched the sea flash between palm trunks. I felt the exact shape of relief. It is not loud. It is not a cheer. It is a chair pulled up to a table that is yours. It is a glass of water after a long job. It is a bed you made yourself. It is Eleanor's voice in your ear saying, "That's better." I do not know what Caroline said when she read my note. I do not know how Travis explained himself when there was no kitchen to claim and no basement to occupy. I do know the sound of a door that closes cleanly. I do know the look of a signature that means something. I do know that justice, quiet and simple, can still be justice all the same. That night in the small hotel room, I opened Janet's email again and read the line that mattered. Funds received and cleared. $295,000 earned, protected, intact. I wrote the number on a notepad and circled it twice. I booked 3 extra nights by the water, nothing fancy, a clean place with a fan and a quiet porch. I made a list the way mechanics make lists. Bank, lawyer, a modest rental, a new routine. I was not escaping. I was building. Chapter 5 would be peace. Feeling dismissed in your own home is heavy, isn't it? If you believe every elder deserves to be seen and treated with respect, comment the keyword, justice. Now watch what comes next and see how a life can change when someone finally decides to prove it. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 3 below to let me know you're here with me. I remember the day the sale closed, not with fireworks, but with a stillness so complete it felt like the air itself had been waiting. The wire transfer hit my account before noon, $295,000 clean and final, the number glowing on the bank screen like a quiet verdict. Added to what Eleanor and I had saved over 4 decades of labor, the total gave me the power to choose, not just to react. For the first time since Caroline and Travis revealed their plans, I felt the ground beneath me shift in my favor. The movers came that same afternoon. I had packed what mattered into labeled boxes: Eleanor's ring, the photo albums, the crystal glasses she loved too much to use. I kept the tools that had outlasted 3 decades of oil changes, the hammer with a scar in the handle, and the clock that once hung above our kitchen table. Everything else went with the house. The Carters walked through with smiles so grateful that my chest eased. Their voices carried excitement, not greed. They asked about water shutoff valves and attic access, not what I owed them. When I handed them the keys, I whispered, "Take care of it. It deserves love." From there, I boarded a plane that carried me out of the gray and into the turquoise. Barbados opened like a postcard, but breathed like a promise. I had searched quietly for years, dreaming of the time when the sea would be my neighbor. With savings Eleanor and I built, plus the sale of the house, I placed an offer on a modest villa facing the ocean, $2.9 million of stone, timber, and light. People might think it extravagant, but to me it was simply the home we had planned, the one she deserved but never reached. I walked through the white archway, set down my bag, and let the salt air press against my face. The first nights I sat on the veranda, listening not to slammed doors or muffled arguments, but to the slow percussion of waves. Every sound was steady, honest. I traced Eleanor's ring with my thumb and whispered, "We made it." The walls did not echo with betrayal. They echoed with surf and birds. For the first time in years, I fell asleep without replaying angry words in my head. In the morning, I rose with the sun, stretched my legs, and felt something I had not felt in a long time: space inside my chest. I could picture Caroline and Travis, though I tried not to dwell on them. I knew from Janet's updates that the story of their scheme had spread among neighbors and friends. Once people learned, they had tried to take a house they had not built. The invitations dried up. The dinner parties stopped. The sympathetic looks turned to silence. They were forced into a small apartment on the far side of town, one with peeling paint and a leaky faucet, a place without roses, without legacy. Travis complained to anyone who would listen, but few listened long. Caroline sent me a letter, pages of apology written in a shaky hand. She said they had been desperate, that they never meant to hurt me. She asked if I would please answer, even a single line. I set the letter on the table, read it twice, then folded it and placed it in a drawer. I told myself what Eleanor once told me: forgiveness does not require reunion. The contrast could not have been sharper. While they wrestled with bills and regrets, I learned the rhythm of the island. Mornings meant strong coffee on the porch, the sun painting the sea with light. Afternoons meant walks along the beach, toes in warm sand, waves curling like an old hymn. Evenings meant quiet dinners with neighbors who asked nothing of me except my presence. They did not care about my bank account or my property. They cared whether I enjoyed the grilled snapper, whether I had tried the local rum, and whether I would join them for music in the square. One afternoon, as I planted a small garden beside the veranda, a boy no older than 10 walked by and asked if I needed help. His hands were thin, his smile too careful. He told me his mother worked long hours, and he often came home to an empty kitchen. I gave him a sandwich, and we talked about school. That night, I lay awake thinking of the times I had failed to notice Caroline's hunger for something I could not give. But this boy reminded me of the power of simple kindness. Within weeks, I found myself visiting a local shelter, speaking with volunteers, and realizing that my story, though heavy, could be used to lift others. I signed up to help with a program that offered meals and tutoring for children. It felt like turning pain into a seed, something Eleanor would have understood. Sometimes the sea at night whispered of the past, and I would let myself feel the weight of what had been taken, or almost taken. But the bitterness no longer clung. Instead, I carried it like an old scar that reminds you of the accident but not the pain. I would whisper to Eleanor, "I am finally free," and believe it. Caroline's second letter came months later, shorter, sharper. She accused me of cruelty, of choosing strangers over blood. I read it under the bright island sun and felt no sting. I slid it into the same drawer as the first. I did not reply. My silence was not revenge. It was a boundary. It was survival. I repeated the words aloud as if to mark them in stone. I don't need them anymore. I have myself. The lessons came clear as the tide. To parents, I would say this: love is not measured by how much of yourself you give away. Love is measured by whether you protect your own dignity while you give. To children, I would say, never mistake sacrifice for entitlement. Every check written, every meal cooked, every tuition bill paid, none of it gives you ownership of a soul. And about human nature itself, greed can burn bright, but it burns fast. It leaves only ashes. Respect endures. On Sunday mornings, I would sit in the small church by the harbor, its windows open to the sea breeze, and listen to the hymns rise. I thought about Caroline sitting in her apartment with peeling paint, about Travis pacing, about the choices that led them there. I prayed for them, not because I wanted them back, but because I wanted to keep my heart clear. To carry hatred is to carry weight. I had put down enough. One evening, after walking on the beach, I returned to find a group of neighbors gathered on my porch. They brought food, guitars, and stories. Someone asked me to share one of mine. I told them about the garage where I worked 60 hours a week, about selling my Mustang to buy Caroline's wedding dress, about the sacrifices that became invisible until they were treated as debts owed. I told them about the papers signed at a polished table, about walking out of the title office lighter than air. When I finished, one woman placed her hand on mine and said, "You chose yourself. That is not selfish. That is sacred." At night, when I lay in bed with the sea humming through the shutters, I often thought of the word worthy. For years, I had doubted it. For years, I had measured myself only by what I gave. Now I understand that being worthy means more than sacrifice. It meant standing firm when those you love betray you. It meant refusing to be erased. The days lengthened into months. The villa is filled with light and laughter, not argument. The garden grew. I painted the veranda the same yellow Eleanor once brushed on our old kitchen walls. I placed the crystal glasses in a cabinet by the window, and when the sunlight hit them, they glowed like small beacons. I never used them for wine. I used them for water, for lemonade, for everyday living. They reminded me that beauty is meant to be enjoyed, not hidden. I knew I had reached the other side of the storm when a neighbor asked me to join a small group raising funds for local children. I agreed without hesitation. Giving no longer felt like an obligation. It felt like a choice. It felt like freedom. That decision planted the seed for what would come in Chapter 6 of my story: a new purpose, a new community, a new way to turn the weight of betrayal into the strength of service. And so I closed the chapter with peace. I did not slam the door on Caroline or Travis, but I did not open it either. Their path was theirs. Mine was mine. I had reclaimed not just my house or my money, but myself. When I looked at the sea each morning, I saw not loss but survival, not anger but truth. The truth is that dignity cannot be stolen unless you hand it over. The truth is that respect begins at home, within your own chest. I whispered it one last time before sleep. I don't need them anymore. I have myself. And with that, I rested in the kind of quiet that feels like victory. I wake each morning to the sound of the Caribbean Sea brushing the shore, the light sliding through white curtains like a gentle hand. The villa is not large, not extravagant compared to the estates some Americans buy here, but for me it feels like a cathedral built of air and water. The garden I planted grows each day. Hibiscus and bougainvillea rising where Eleanor once dreamed of planting flowers, but never got the chance. I bend my knees in the soil, hands dirty, heart quiet, and I whisper to her picture on the patio table, "You would love this place." The ocean wind carries the words away, but leaves the comfort behind. Inside, my life has taken a rhythm that heals. I sit in the study most afternoons, books stacked beside me, a journal open with lines I never thought I would write at 68. I write about betrayal, yes, but also about survival. I write about the sound of hammers in a garage 40 years ago, about the weight of sacrifice, about the moment I chose dignity over silence. Sometimes neighbors stop by, bringing fruit or fresh bread. They don't ask for my money, my house, or my compliance. They ask if I am well, if I will join them for music in the square. That is all. Caroline and Travis live in another world now. I know enough to understand their fall was real. Travis lost his job after word spread of what he tried to do. Caroline took a position answering phones, barely enough to cover rent. They moved into a small apartment in a rough part of town, the walls thin, the carpet stained. A friend of mine back home told me they tried calling, left messages, even mailed letters asking for forgiveness. I did not reply. I read one letter once, folded it carefully, and set it in the drawer with the first. I do not hate them. I simply will not give them access to my peace again. The lesson has carved itself deep. Self-respect is not negotiable. Bloodlines do not entitle anyone to your life, your home, or your soul. Parents like me often think love means emptying every pocket, selling every dream, bending until the spine cracks. But love without boundaries is not love. It is surrender. I have learned that children must carry responsibility with the gifts they receive. Without that balance, love turns into expectation, and expectation breeds greed. One afternoon, while I sat on the veranda with a glass of water in one of Eleanor's crystal goblets, I opened a letter unlike the others. It was an invitation from a local charity helping children with school meals and supplies. They asked if I might volunteer time or resources. I smiled. Instead of throwing the letter into the drawer, I placed it on my desk. That week, I walked into their office, shook hands, and promised to give $20,000 from my account to their program. The coordinator's eyes filled with tears, but I told her, "This isn't charity. This is gratitude. I was given a second chance at life, and I need to pass it on." That decision shifted something inside me. Every Tuesday, I meet children who remind me of what innocence looks like. They run into the classroom, some barefoot, some carrying notebooks half full of drawings. I read to them, I help with homework, and I plant seeds in a small garden behind the building. When I leave, my steps feel lighter than when I arrived. The betrayal that once chained me now fuels a mission that Eleanor would have blessed with her whole heart. Still, the contrast stays sharp. Caroline and Travis continue to spiral in their own bitterness. They thought taking my house would give them security, but it gave them nothing. They thought pushing me into a nursing home would solve their fears, but it exposed their character to the world. Friends distanced themselves, whispers grew, and their circle shrank until only shadows remained. I don't gloat, but I recognize the justice. Choices have consequences. Betrayal corrodes not only relationships, but reputations. At night, when the waves echo against the stone walls of the villa, I reflect on what all of this means. For parents, the lesson is simple. Never let your sacrifices erase your own worth. Give, but also teach. Provide, but also hold boundaries. Your children must learn gratitude, not entitlement. For children, the truth is harder. Every gift given by a parent is not a debt to be collected, but a blessing to be honored. To twist love into leverage is to cut the very branch you are standing on. And about human nature itself. This world teaches us to grab, to claim, to demand. But in truth, the only possessions that never lose value are integrity and dignity. Money will vanish, houses will change hands, fortunes will fade. But your character, once corrupted, leaves you poorer than any empty bank account. That is the unchanging truth. One morning, I walked to the market square. The sun was high, children laughed around the fountain, and I stopped to buy bread. The baker, an older man with hands dusted in flour, said to me, "You look lighter these days." I nodded and told him, "I finally chose myself." He smiled, and I knew he understood without another word. Later that week, I placed Eleanor's wedding picture on my writing desk. Her eyes in that photograph still carried the light of a woman who believed in honor above all else. I traced the frame and whispered, "I kept the promise, Eleanor. No one took away what we built." Then I leaned back in my chair, listening to the sound of gulls outside, and felt the certainty that my journey had come full circle. Caroline and Travis will live their story, and I will live mine. I no longer wait for apologies, nor do I replay their betrayal in my head. My silence is my boundary is my freedom. The last call I ignored was the loudest because as the phone rang, I whispered to myself, "I don't need their words. I have my life." Now every day I wake with the sun, I water the garden Eleanor dreamed of, and I step into the world lighter, stronger, unbroken. Each morning proves that I chose right. Each night confirms that peace is possible, even after betrayal. And so I leave you with this. I have learned that true family is not who shares your name, but who respects your soul. I have learned that the only inheritance worth fighting for is dignity. And I have learned that in this modern world, crowded with noise and greed, the quiet of self-respect is the rarest treasure. I sit on the veranda, the ocean stretching wide, the crystal glass catching the light. I raise it slightly, as if to toast the horizon, and I say softly, to dignity, to freedom, to the life no one can take. Then I close my eyes, the sound of the sea filling my heart, and I know this chapter is finished. The story has come to an end. I hope it has brought you valuable lessons and insights. If you enjoyed this content, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next video. Goodbye, and see you again.